Welcome students. Today is Tuesday, March the 2nd, and today we're going to be studying about lesson number 3 for our unit 6, making connections to decimal notation. On the next slide, I have our multiplication table that's there as a resource for you to be able to go back to and use if you need it. And our next two slides, of course, is places where you can insert a picture of your work. So that means if you're working in your notebook, or if you're working in your binder, you're going to need to show your work to your teacher. And this is where you, after you've taken a picture of your work, you insert it into these slides. Our learning target for today, I can express equivalence between fractions and decimals using models. And these are just a breakdown of our standards. Our essential questions remain the same for this unit 6. How does the place of the digit within the base 10 system affect the value of the digit across the decimal point? And also, what is the relationship between fractions and decimals? What is a decimal and how is it related to a fraction? So if you're at home now and you are not with our live session, I want you to pause the video and go ahead and get your notebook out. Get your notebook out, and I want you to write down your thoughts about these. So try to answer it in your notebook. So in our live session, we're going to discuss it as maybe as breakout groups or as a whole class. So you've had a chance to pause the video and to write down your answer to this question. What is a decimal and how is it related to a fraction? And your thoughts. So some of the things that you could have said is that a decimal, it separates a whole number from a part of a whole. It separates a whole number from a part of a whole. And also, when you think about money, you always see a decimal point there. So when it comes to money, it separates the dollars from the cents. So the decimal separates the dollars from the cents when it comes to money. And the second part, how is it related to a fraction? Well, they both have a connection to parts of a whole. So a fraction is parts of a whole, and the decimal, it separates the whole from the fraction, which is also part of a whole. So they have that connection. All right, so you've had a chance to, again, to write that answer in there, and we've just talked about it. We're going to be discussing that a little bit more here today. And on our next slide, we're going to represent the fraction, the decimal 1.82. So we're going to represent the decimal 1.82, and this is actually, you read it as 1 and 82 hundredths. So 1 and 82 hundredths is what we're going to represent. So what would go in the ones placed on here? So you got one whole that's represented right here. So that's one whole. And so basically we're taking this 1 and we're putting it down here. Now, of course, you got the decimal. Then you got the decimal that goes right here. So you don't put a number inside of that spot because it separates the whole from the decimals, from the parts of a whole, which are over here. Then you got 8/10. So this is in the tenths place value spot. You got 8/10. So that's what the 8 represents. This is 8 out of a possible 10. Then you got 200ths. So the 2 is in the hundredths place value spot. So the 2 goes right here. All right, so now it's going to be your turn. And in our live class, you're going to work in groups, possibly in breakout groups to do this. Or your teacher may have you working as a whole class to complete these. If you're at home and you're working on this on your own because you didn't attend our live lesson, you're still going to get a chance to do these individually. And so for the next 8 slides, you're going to show the decimals given. So you're going to work to show the decimals that are going to be given, and then you're going to write each decimal as a fraction. And here are the instructions. So this activity right here, these are instructions for the next few slides. You're going to use the paint bucket at the top of the slides to shade in the grid to represent the given decimals. Then on the following slide, type each decimal as a fraction. Okay? And I'm gonna make this a little bit smaller for you. We're gonna go on and go to our go to our very next one. So those are the instructions. And for the first one, let's see, I'm gonna bring this up. So, okay, so instructions again. So we've gone over this. So you can use the paint bucket at the top of the slides to shade in the grid to represent the given decimals. And then on the next slide after that one, you're going to type each decimal as a fraction. And let's look at the first one together. So this one says represent 4/10. So this one says represent 4/10. And what you're going to have to do is, you're going to choose which one of these grids that you want to use. So you choose which one that you want to use, which one you think you can best represent 4/10. Now, for the first one, I'm going to click inside of the actual, I'm going to click inside of one of the rows here on the tenths grid. And then I'm going to go to the paint bucket. I'm going to pick a color. So I pick red for that one. So I've got that one filled in. So now I actually want to do 4 of them. So there's a way that I can, without having to do it each time, I can click inside. I can hold the shift button. I can hold the shift button on my keyboard, and I can move over, use my arrow key to move over, and that's going to fill in as many as I need. So I just stop when I need it to stop. So once I do that, then I can go back up to the paint bucket, get my color, then I come back down and I click in it. So I've got it all filled in. You can do it individually, or you can do it more than one at a time. So I've chosen the tenths one because this is 4/10. You can better represent the tenths by using the tenths grid. That's what I did. So that is our answer for the first one. And let's go to our next slide. So now here you're going to show 4/10 as a fraction, remember. We've been studying fractions, so we'll go ahead and do that. You're just going to type it in to the text box down at the bottom. So I'm going to represent 4/10 as a fraction, and there I go. I've got 4/10 represented as a fraction. So on our next one, you're going to represent 400s. So in the next one, you're going to represent 400. So you have to choose, you're going to use the tenths grid, or you're going to use the hundreds grid. So after you've done that, then you go to the next one. You're going to type in the fraction for 400s. You type it into the text box here. And then there's another on the next slide. This is a different one. You're going to represent 4400s. So you can represent 4400s. So that means you have to choose. You're going to use the hundreds grid, or you're going to use the tenths grid. And after you've done that, you're going to show 4400s as a fraction, and you type it into the text box here. And we've got another one that says 1.44, which is 1 in 4400. So 1 in 4400 is what you need to represent here. So which ones are you going to use? And here you're going to show that as a fraction, 1 in 4400. Okay. And when you get to this part, you can just pause and we'll go over this together. So going back up, I've already done the first one for you where we represented 4/10, and I chose the tenths grid, and I painted in 4 of the columns here. And on the next slide, I represented that as a fraction, 4/10. So I put it in fraction form in the text box. So your task now is to go ahead and do the rest of those. So pause the video and go on and complete the rest of them. All right, so you've had an opportunity to pause the video and go ahead and do the rest of them. So this is the first one that I did already, representing 4/10. So I chose the tenths grid to represent that. That was my the best choice for that one. And as a fraction, 4/10, 4/10. And the next one here is 400s. So you should have chosen the hundreds grid for that one to represent 4, and all you needed was 4 units shaded in there out of 100 total. And this is what it looks like as a fraction, 400s. And on the next one, you got 4400s. So I chose the hundreds grid for that one also, and I've got 44 of them shaded in here. And for the fraction, it's going to be 44 over 100. Now here I've got 1 and 4400. So 1 and 4400. So that means that you're going to need 2 of these grids. So you need 1 hole shaded in. That represents 1 hole. And you also need 44 out of the hundreds grid shaded in. So you need 1 hole to represent the 1 and 44 hundreds to represent the fraction part of it. What does it look like? 1 and 44 hundredths right here is what it looks like. So if you need to pause my video and go back to look at any of them to make corrections to yours, please go ahead on and do that. All right, so you've had a chance to make any corrections to yours. So let's go on to our next slide right here. What does this represent? What fraction does this represent? So you got to go up and look at count how many are shaded, and you need to know the total amount. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that are shaded. 6 are shaded in, so we're going to keep going though. 7, 8, 9, 10. So 6 out of 10 are shaded. So that's 6/10. 6/10 are shaded. Let's go on and go to our next one. And 6/10 is going to represent it as 0.6, 0.6. So here, what do we have that's shaded in? This looks like this is a 100 grid right here. So this is a 100 grid. So there's total of 100 of these in here. So let's see. And each row represents 10. So each row represents 10. You can count them individually. It's going to take you a very long time. But you need to know that if you count each row, it's just going to be 10. So we got 10 in this row. That's 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. But this one's not all the way in. So we got to take away 1. So that means 79. 79 out of 100. So this is 79 hundredths. So 79 hundredths is what's shaded in here. That's going to be 0.79. 0.79 for this one. So on our next slide, this is going to be your independent practice for the day. Now, you got a choice on how to work on this. Depends on how your teacher wants you to do them. You got a Google form that you can complete the independent work on. A Google form or page 13 in your binder. So they're the same thing. They're just in different forms. So you got page 13 in your binder or clicking on the Google form. Now, remember, if you do it in your binder on page 13, if you complete it in there, then that means that you're going to have to take a picture of your work and insert it into the slides in order for you to get credit. Otherwise, you would not get credit for doing the work. And here is the Google form for you to complete the same independent work. So you click on there, it's true or false. Decide if each equation is true or false. If an equation is not true, rewrite it to make it correct. So here, enter your first and your last name. So this is our first one. It says 4/10 is equal to 400ths. Is that true or false? 4/10 is equal to 400ths. So you're going to answer true or false. And then you're going to answer true or false. And then when you make your corrections, just go ahead and make your corrections in your notebook, guys. So whatever correction, when you make your corrections, you're going to need to make your corrections inside of your notebook. So answer true or false right here. And then the next one, 1700ths equals 1700ths. Is that true or false? If you think it's false, you got to mark false, and then you make your correction in your notebook. Here you got 900ths equals 900ths. True or false? Next, 600ths is equal to 60/100ths. True or false? 8/10 is equal to 80/100ths. And next, how are fractions and decimals related? So we've already discussed that in class. So how are fractions and decimals related? Just type a short answer in here. Once you've done all this, guys, go and hit submit. So once you've done everything, go and hit submit. All right, so this is our next slide. This is just a reminder of what we need to do for independent work. So making sure that you complete that independent work on the Google form that we just talked about. Or if you did it on page 13, make sure that you take a picture of your work and you insert it into the slides. And you also have Dreambox. Remember, our goal for the week is to complete at least 5 lessons by Friday. You don't have to stop at 5. We still want you to continue even after you've gotten 5.